All right, everybody, want to welcome Coach Josh to the podcast. Very excited to talk to Coach Josh, learn more about his journey, about himself. Maybe he's going to share some intimate stuff with us that we don't even know about his soccer journey, but I want to welcome you, Coach Josh. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good, man. I'm excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of yours myself, so I'm happy to be here and be able to share my story and exchange whatever information we can to just help the soccer community.
Yeah, of course. And part of the podcast and part of us meeting is to have these type of conversations, these discussions, ask these questions for the audience that is listening, whether you're a player, one of your players that you coach, future player, or any players around, the country, hopefully the world that gets to see this, coaches, parents. We're trying to provide as much value as possible from your experiences, from your story, and try to inspire so everybody can do more. Right? Raise the game. I'm big on that, raising the game together. So it's not just you, it's not just them, it's us. How are we going to raise the game together? Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I want to get right into it. I want to learn a little bit more about you, how you started with the sport, how you started playing. Can you, right away, just tell us, when was the first time you were introduced to the sport? How young were you?
I think I was maybe 8 or 9. So comparing myself to now from what kids are at 8 and 9, it's a landslide of a difference. I mean, I guess you would consider me a later bloomer, but actually I love telling the story. So I grew up in a family with from baseball. My parents were from Mexico, and my dad was into baseball, and that was the first sport I got into. And then tried soccer as well, and I started at AYSO, and I was that player on the field. I would just kick the ball and I'd keep falling, and I'd kick the ball and I'd keep falling, and then eventually I had an AYSO coach. I mean, coaches weren't really educated back then on the psychology of a player and how to push a player. So he came up to me, and I'll never forget this. I carry this with me for everything I do in life. But he said, "Hey, maybe soccer's not for you. You should try playing another sport." And I remember just going in tears, man, to the car when I got done with training, and my parents said, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I said, "Oh, like my coach said I shouldn't play soccer. I wasn't good enough." And yeah, that I get goosebumps thinking about it, man. But it built a desire in me to prove not only him wrong but myself right, that I was able to do anything I put my mind to. So my dad, he no education in soccer, didn't play growing up in Mexico. So he went to a Soccer Central. It's a local store in Torrance, and we just bought a bunch of clips. He bought the Invincibles, the Arsenal era with Thierry Henry, and a bunch of training clips, SAQ, technical training, and it was almost every day after school. It wasn't homework first; it was training first. The moment I got out of school, we trained from 3 to 5 p.m. and then I'd have my training after that. And to sum it up, I became a better player by being consistent. I wasn't born with talent. I wasn't gifted by playing with uncles or family. I put in the work, and there was two choices I could have made. I could have quit and said, yeah, this coach is right, or I can prove this guy wrong. And like I said, it's something that stuck with me forever, and I carry that with what I do and everything in life. If someone tells me I can't do something, I love to be able to prove them wrong. And I think if you have the right mindset and the right work ethic, anything in life you can attain anything. And that's something I try to preach with what I do in my program. There's players who get left behind, or they're told that they're not good enough, or this and that. And I always take back that story I had with myself and try to, relate to that kid and really be that person that can push them not only on the field, but mentally. And, above all, teaching kids how to play, it's teaching kids how to believe in themselves. And I know that may sound, cliche, but it's gone such a long way for me in life. I mean, anything you put your mind to, you can achieve. And that's, that was my journey of how I started playing.
Wow, that's alarming, number one, from an adult to say that to a kid.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's obviously something that I just kind of When I heard you say that, I was like, whoa, like that's a big no-no, right?
Yeah,
For any adult to say that to a kid, because
yeah,
kids can improve, in a short amount of time. But for somebody to say something, it could have been very detrimental, but
yeah.
as a kid, you said you were 8, 9 when he said that?
I was about 8 or 9 years old. Yeah, yeah, I was
Yeah,
playing.
and that's interesting because looking at it from some parents that might be listening, your 9-year-old, some 9-year-olds will take that and just be like, that's it, I'm done. But
Yeah, yeah,
you were able to have that mental toughness, or that understanding of, what, I can use this as something, turn it into a positive, right? And you had the
yeah,
support system of your dad, it sounds like, and your
yeah,
family, to be able to help you and say, you know what, let's do this together, and I think
yeah,
that's a huge thing. And so, wow, that's a great story. That's a
yeah.
great story. So then what happened after that, Josh? Like, you progressed, you got better. Now fast forward to maybe 11, 12, 13. What happened after that in your soccer journey?
Yeah, so after a few years, again, I was training 5, 6 times a week, 2 hours a day. And, I also want to spread this message that, again, my dad had no education of soccer. And it's just a matter of putting the work in consistently,
Yeah.
and I think that's with anything in life. And, there's no magic drill, there's no magic recipe to development. I think the only thing is it's really being consistent
Yeah.
with good habits. And obviously, once you get better coaching, then you skyrocket in your rate. But yeah, once I hit 12 and 13, club back then was very difficult to get into. Now it's very saturated. Anyone can almost get into club. Back when I was in club, it was a privilege to play. They used to call it gold, silver, and bronze. And I ended up playing club for a few years, and then financially, we couldn't do it anymore.
Mm.
So I stopped playing club, and then I was able to continue through high school because high school offers it's a free program. And then I actually started working really early. I was 16 and I got my first job, and I kind of had to step away from playing and enjoying, uh, you know, playing as most people get to till they're 18, maybe 22. So reality hit a lot earlier for me, just due to like family, you know, problems and
Life.
financial life. Yeah, life. But I'm grateful for it. Looking back at it now, I matured a lot sooner. So I had a retail job for a few months, and then I got a job. I quit a few months later, and I got a job at Galaxy Center. So it's an indoor facility, and I loved it. I was around what I loved to do. I still loved it, but I was around what I was able to miss out on because I had to, work. Um, and I just saw coaches interacting with kids. And at first I was hired as a cafe, the barista guy. So I was just selling snacks. I was selling coffee, and but that was my goal eventually, was to coach. So I got my shot, and I fell in love with it, man. I was 17 and I felt like I was not working every time I stepped into work. I would go in from 4 to 8. I would get there at 3, leave at 11 p.m. And I
Mm.
just love the environment. Being around people who love soccer, being around kids who wanted to get better, and being able to say a small detail. I wasn't much of a, I didn't know much of coaching, but you're able to direct kids in simple ways, and for them to respond. I loved it, and I think it's being able to make an impact was great. And I continued to play throughout high school, but over time, I kind of geared towards more coaching, and I played in college for a little bit. Uh, but yeah, I just got more into coaching. I ended up working for another company with Toka. I think I started there when I was 18, and we had players like Giassi's artists come in, AJ De La Garza, Kristen Press. I got to train them a couple times, but it was always the older trainers that got to do it. And I was mesmerized by it. I mean, you had professional players coming in, and then eventually I stepped out of that, and I think I was 19 or 20, and I got my first gig at my high school. I was, I think, 19 years old, coaching my former high school, and I was a Frostoff coach. And um, that was that was a great experience for me. I was there for, I think, two years, and we had 2 great years. And one thing I noticed with the kids is when we were there was only maybe 1 or 2 players that had a really good technical ability,
Mm.
and they were comfortable with the ball, and the rest of the players were just consistently just sending long ball. And, I was getting frustrated. I was 19 at the time, and I was trying to get them to understand, hey, you got to be patient with the game. Um, Not everything needs to be direct. And I noticed that there was just a poor foundation set. So, fast forwarding to where I am now, I thought if I'm able to start the kids at a younger age, I'm able to build those good habits. So by the time they hit high school, everything's going to be almost set in place. So, I'm a big believer in creating a strong foundation technically, so players are comfortable whether they're playing, an attacking or defensive position, midfield. I believe every player needs to be equally as technical, just to be able to, be versatile. So, yeah, that's
Interesting.
pretty
Wow.
much, yeah, for after.
Coaching. Wow, that's a great story because you stumbled upon it through work, right? The whole coaching and the passion for coaching
Yeah,
through the necessity of life, you were able to find your passion,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Run with your passion and now, you know, getting people to or families, players to understand the importance of a foundation, right? Where you're at. So that's a great story. So then
yeah.
after the Galaxy Center, after Doka, so fast forward a little bit, what happened in your coaching gig? You're, maybe early 20s now. So what happened after that?
Yeah, so I had stepped out, and then excuse me. I started just training outside of Toka. And I think I was 20, 21 at the time, and everything I was doing with the high school kids, I felt was working, and the boys were
Mm.
finding success not only in high school but outside of high school. And I decided to kind of just take the leap and just start my own program. So um, yeah, so I did that, and I was maybe getting three to four kids a week. It wasn't much. It was a big sacrifice because I went from a guaranteed 5 sessions a day. Everything's being scheduled for me. I have the facility to finding parks, convincing people that, hey, this is what I have to provide. This is my service. And it was tough. The first few months were tough. My parents weren't happy with it because my income wasn't as consistent. Um, at the time, I actually had got accepted to be a longshoreman as well, which is a really big deal, and it's hard to get into. And in my parents' eyes, that was kind of the ticket to the American dream. And I denied it, and I said, "Hey, look, that's not for me. I want to coach." And they said, "Well, how secure is your future with coaching?" And I said, I don't care how much I make as long as I'm coaching. Like, so that was my mentality, and little by little, it grew, and we were doing individual sessions. And I think it really changed when COVID came around. And I know COVID was probably a difficult time for everybody. It was for me too, but it was a big turning point where, as COVID started to slow down, more kids wanted to get out and train, but we were limited to training due to we'd go to a park and we'd get kicked out by a park ranger. And I told parents, hey, look, I'm limited to time, so I'm willing to train groups of 4 to 6 max. And I ended up really enjoying doing group sessions a lot more, because one-on-ones, I think, are great tools to build, but it started to become almost unrealistic, where you're only going against cones. So I thought, well, if I put this player who wants to get better and this player wants to get better against each other, I mean, by natural human evolution, we go through competition. And it ended up just working out really well, where I was able to start applying more small-sided games, and it actually expanded my knowledge as a coach. How can I make this session as efficient as possible, where we can target multiple factors in the game that they want to improve on, whether it's dribbling, passing, shooting, um, things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then I think over the last 2 years, 3 years, I I started moving. I've done futsal for a while, but I started moving towards futsal. Um, I'm sure everyone knows who Toke is over in Downey, and I had
Mhm.
gone down there, and I'm good friends with the guys who run it. And I was inspired by the way the kids were playing there. They all had great touches, quick thinking, quick decision making, and I thought I want to do something like that. I want to do something where we can bring that to the South Bay and provide kids an opportunity to play at that level, because there is futsal here, but it's not. Um, there was just leagues. There wasn't really any sort of training environment.
Yeah.
So and futsal, kind of rewind to the beginning of the story. Futsal was huge for me. My dad actually, once he got more into coaching, uh, we would go to a local park and there was local kids kind of up to no good, and he would bring them over to us and he would ask them to start training. And I think I was 11 at the time and these kids were 14, 15, and it turned into us training. My dad was training 14, 15 year olds, and it really helped me playing with older kids. And there was times where we would be training till 9 p.m. and then the lights shut off, but the street lights on the parking lot were open. So we'd be playing futsal with trash cans. Like, there was no futsal courts. It was just trash can and
Street.
trash can.
Yeah.
Street, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We would fall, there'd be blood. We'd bring a speaker out. So it was awesome, man. I mean, it's everything I'm doing now as an adult. I'm almost like reliving my childhood, but providing it for the community. And futsal was such a huge tool for me. I mean, I got to play against older kids, and it really taught me that you don't have to be fast, you don't have to be strong, you just have to be smart. And I think futsal is a great tool for that. And there's a lot of kids that have came through our program who said, hey, my coach said we're not fast enough, and parents want to focus on speed. And I said, look, my goal isn't to make an 8-year-old the fastest player on the field. My goal is to help a player become comfortable with like 1v1 situations given, where we can't teach every situation in a game, but I can tell you what will happen if a defender's in front of you, what will happen if a defender's side on, or if a defender's coming from behind. So I think it's being smart and understanding when to change direction, when to go forward, when to change speed. And futsal was huge for me in that. And again, playing with older kids. So yeah, fast forward to today. That's we run a league on Fridays where it's just a place where kids can come and play. It's a pressure-free environment, and I think that's another thing that's important, is creating environments where the pressure isn't high on the kids and they're not being coached every second to make decisions for a result. It's we have the speaker playing for a reason. That way, it overcasts the parents' voices if they want to coach. And I don't know if you've ever played under music, but your body starts to follow the tempo and the rhythm,
Yeah.
and it's such a good time, man. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
7 now, and I would pick to play a futsal match over an 11-a-side any day.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So I have a quick story. A friend, you may know him, Willie Diaz. He's at the Strikers right now.
Yeah.
Um, he told me, I was asking him because he went overseas to play, right? And this relates to the whole music thing. So he said he was watching these kids play similar, like street, right? And they're having fun, they're competing, but then there's somebody that was in charge, similar to what you do, in charge of the games, organizing, etc. And he said they didn't have the music playing the entire time, but
Yeah.
just think about this, right? And everyone watching. He
Yeah.
said he said whenever he said the person in charge would turn on the music for a minute straight. Okay, 1 minute straight. So within that minute that you hear the music, he said each goal you score within that minute while the music is on, it counts as 3. So what
Wow.
that did to everybody was create
Yeah.
more excitement, drive, and you saw just the energy just pick up, right? And it was
Wow.
just crazy. So
That's awesome.
it's interesting, right? And
Yeah.
some may look at that and say, oh, that makes sense. Some may like, you know what, maybe when you turn the music on, I don't know, like however
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
want to create that environment, but they created that environment, to see a
Yeah.
change in behavior when that happens, right?
That's awesome, man.
But so I thought it was pretty cool. And it was just like it was street, wasn't really organized, but when they heard
Yeah.
that music for a minute, it was just for 1 minute. It was
Yeah.
like everything would just pick up and be
Tempo.
chaotic and crazy.
Just
Yeah, the tempo just
yeah.
shoot up. right? So I thought that was pretty interesting. All right.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. I'm gonna have to try that one of these days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
like that.
again, like each environment is different. However you want to create it, however you want to inspire, however you want to, make it your own. Like I think people will vibe with it, either way. But
Yeah,
it sounds like a fun environment. I have not yet been there to check it out, but I will soon.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so tell me now a little bit more about, your ambitions with the program. I know you and I have been talking, off the record on like taking teams, we're organizing something right now, you and I together to take players to international tournament, but you've had experience now taking players from Southern California, the South Bay area. With For those of you that don't know what South Bay is, it's I would say in between LA and Orange County, I would say, right? Roughly
Yeah, Orange City.
of California, right? You're taking players and you're bringing them to international level tournaments in this case Spain, and you've done this for what, 2 years now?
Yeah, 2 years,
Two
and then
years, right? And so what was the thought process behind you saying, you know what, I want to do this? Like who who told you about this? Like tell us about a little bit more about how this started and why.
yeah. So I had one of the kids I trained. The parent is really well connected, and he had sent his older son maybe 10, 12 years ago, and to Spain when he was playing against La Masia when it was Ansu Fati and Daku Fubo. So and those players are now all La Liga One players, and it's crazy to see. So, we were talking, and he asked me. He said, "Hey, I like what you're doing with your program. Would you like to go out to Spain and take kids out?" And I was in shock. I wasn't really sure if it was legit or if it was real. And I did my research, looked it up, and it takes teams in Europe almost a month just to qualify. And I didn't really know, or I didn't know what to expect going in. But um, after I went, I fell in love with the game even more. I mean, and I think my biggest takeaway in the last 2 years would be culture is the key. It's the answer to everything. And I my first year I tried to figure it out. Why are these kids a landslide better than our kids that we have? They're just better in every single aspect. And I went the second year and I asked myself the same question. A lot of reflecting, and I would say my answer is culture is the most important thing. I mean, the they have families who have been playing since the late 1800s, early 1900s. For us, we have the MLS, which started in the mid 90s. So I think it's going to take time for us to get there, but I think there's a lot of people like you, cultivating the right idea as to what it takes to get to that level. But again, it's not just training, but creating a love for the game, like a genuine love, because those kids out there, kids, parents, everything, we would go out to training facilities, and it's almost like a social thing for them. They have parents there, they're drinking beer, you know they're not spying on their kids for every minute of the session. They're letting the coaches do their thing. The parents are talking about games that went on throughout the week. And even when the kids are done training, they hang out. And I talked to a couple kids from, I believe it was Teresa, where Chavi grew up. And I asked the kids, I said, "Oh, how many days a week do you train?" And they said, "Oh, we only train twice a week. But, we're here every day because we love it." And these kids were 12, 13, and from the time we got there to the time we left, they had already finished training, but they were still and they weren't doing any intense training, but they just had two backpacks set up and they're just playing nonstop, and they're laughing and they're enjoying it. It's not a job for them. It's what church is for people here. That's what the game is out there for them. It's a religion, and it's a part of their DNA. And I think that goes such a long way. And I think the only way we can really cultivate that is, having our kids watch more games, going to games like LASC. I think they've done a really good job creating a good culture that simulates that. And, but it's, it's not just playing it, but it's feeling the game, feeling the love for it. And,
Yeah.
So I think that was huge. And I think taking kids from the South Bay to Spain, it really opens your eyes. You think, we have it here. We have the best players. We're set. And then you go out to this whole other country and you realize, wow, we're very, very behind. But, we can take that in a positive way and just grow from it. And that's my goal is, when we took the kids there, can it open their eyes so when they come back, they think while they're at training, am I really working hard enough? If I'm comparing myself to the kid I saw in Barcelona, on Real Madrid, um, even the local Spanish academies were ridiculously good. I mean, you had Cornea, a local team in Barcelona, beat Real Madrid and Barca to win the cup last year. And I think everyone at least us as a guest, were in shock because we're assuming that La Masia is the best, Real Madrid is, and they're great. Don't get me wrong. They're amazing. It's the best game I've ever watched is watching them play, those kids play. But it's amazing to see how it's not just them, but it's every local team from Spain was able to dominate on teams that would come from, we had PSG Academy, and there was local teams beating them by 5 goals within 25-minute games. And it was amazing to see, So I think it was definitely eye-opening, and that's something that I tried to instill in my program where, yeah, they come to train, but I also try to preach the more you do at home, the better you'll get. So even if you're training with your club team 3 times a week, you're coming out to train with a private trainer, or you're in a program, it's still not enough. You have to, and it shouldn't feel like a job. It should be something you do for the sake of loving it. And I think that's the most important message to get across, because if you're doing it to make your parents happy, if you're doing it because, you're following a trend on social media, no, it's got to come from, within you. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that resonates with me when I was a kid, because that's something that, I grew a desire from what my coach had told me, and I
Yeah.
ended up falling in love with the game. So it's, yeah, I think it's just
Interesting.
having a burning desire.
Yeah, no, and I think unless you're exposed to what that culture is internationally, whether it's Argentina, Brazil, Central America, Europe, Africa, even, etc., everybody has a burning desire to play the game, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh
to
yeah.
play the game a lot. It's just the way it is. Like, this is just this is what we do,
Yeah.
right? This is just every single day, Monday through Sunday. If there was 8 days a week, they'd be playing 8 days a week. It's just what they do. That's
Yeah.
what they enjoy. That's what they love, right?
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it, from the grandmas to, the kids, the little ones, right? So what you saw over there, I just want to talk about a little bit, competition, what they were doing, how the coaches were communicating. Let's say from a coach's point of view, right? On you being there, you taking teams now and you playing in that competition, and you also coach a club here in Southern California. What did you notice from the playing styles to what the kids were doing on the field, etc., and what they were being asked to do? What did you notice in that tournament?
Yeah. So I think that's a big takeaway that I had when I was there. I was sitting as close as I could to Barcelona when they were playing, and it was the first minute of the game. They play the ball to the left back, and the left back tries to play the ball to the keeper, and the pass was too short. The forward came and scored, and I immediately looked at the coach and wanted to see his reaction. And the only thing he said was in Spanish. He said, "Hey, it's fine. On to the next one. On to the next one." The kid did not keep his head down longer than a second. His head was up. He actually came back, and I think he had the game-winning goal or assist, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and it was unbelievable to see, and it made me think that, I think we have this mentality here that if you're harder, if you're louder, um, if you instill this fear in kids that they're going to perform, and it's the complete opposite. And this is coming from Barcelona coaches, that the mentality is it's extremely positive. It's extremely positive, and encouraging. And, I found that interesting because I just had this misconception that it would be just intense, and the kids just being torn apart after like each mistake they'd make for a higher standard. But it was it definitely changed my style of coaching coming back. Because growing up, I was coached different club coaches, and every time we'd make a mistake, we'd get pulled out. Um, and I think that pressure of making a mistake, it doesn't help us grow as players or as people. And that's something I instill within my program, and what I try to do with every kid I work with is, if they make a mistake, you know, if it's a consistent mistake, you have to eventually acknowledge it. But if it's a mistake, but the idea was there, I think it's important to acknowledge that, hey, that was a great idea. Just time it differently, or, you can give a small detail, but um, I think most coaches stop sessions when something goes wrong. And I'm now learning that it's more important to stop sessions when something goes right, because now everyone's going to really want to feed off that praise and that acknowledgement. And you're
Yeah.
also creating a positive environment where kids can grow, and they're not afraid of taking a player on. They're not
Yeah.
afraid of you know trying a dangerous pass. So I think that's a huge takeaway, the biggest takeaway actually that I had there.
No.
And you can tell the players played with so much confidence. And I think that the mental aspect of the game is really important, and that's something that should not be overlooked.
Yeah, that's good advice, and that's a good takeaway because I think they're being asked to do something that is not easy, right? And when you take risks like that, right, there's going to be mistakes, and soccer's a game of mistakes, right?
Yeah,
And that's all it is. But how you react, like you're saying, after you make a mistake, to correct it, to help your team, to do better, it's a huge way of observing the game from a coach's point of view of how are you going to impact these players when something does go wrong? Like, how are you going to switch their mind? Because that player can, not all levels, but especially at the youth, where you're encouraging that, and that's fine. That's what I'm asking you to do,
yeah,
right? If I'm
yeah,
asking you to do that and you do it, it can happen to you, it can happen to that player, but then everybody else also is watching on the field and also watching on the bench. And so then what I've noticed as well is that if you instill that fear, then somebody else that comes in, right, and plays that position, they're also going to be fearful of making mistakes where you have to take those risks sometimes, whether it's losing the ball, trying to break lines, taking a player on, playing it back, the keeper makes a mistake, the pass is bad, but how are you going to react to that? So that's good advice. And
yeah.
then also from playing and coaching and what you saw, let's say from I don't know, tactical point of view, like what did you notice about their flow? What did you notice about their ability to be comfortable on the ball, like all that? What did you notice in the tournament from you just observing players there in that tournament?
Yeah, I was pretty amazed. I mean, first off, I think a basic formation that we use here is a 2-3-1, and it's seven aside there up until I think U12, I believe.
Mm.
And I noticed they were using a 3-2-1 or a 3-1-2, and their ability to use their build out line is slightly deeper, and their nine would just sit at the build out line. And I think they're whether they're playing a 3-2-1 or 3-1-2, but they would have two players sitting at the build out line, and that would just completely stretch the field and create space in the middle for the center mid to come receive the ball and turn. So I think it's just maximizing the space and stretching the field. Each player was comfortable with the left foot, the right foot. Um, each player was comfortable to dribble, to pass with both feet. They could shoot the ball really well from almost 30 yards out, and it was pretty impressive. I mean, we don't see really long range shots here much in the youth age, but just their ability to time runs, their combinations, it just seemed like they've played with each other for 10 plus years. Their IQ, I mean, it looks like they're playing professional soccer. I mean, you look at a game here in the US, and you'll go to an MLS game, which they're great, but you watch a U11 game from Barcelona, and the tempo, the flow, the understanding of timing and spacing of passes, when to come check in, when to get out. Um, it's unbelievable. I mean, they're light years ahead, and it's something I think we should really aspire to get to. And I've seen top teams in State Cup and around the area, and I compare it to them, and that they're good here, but you go out there and you realize that there's still so much that we have to do to get to that point. So
Yeah.
that was
In a very United States type of question, what did you notice about the power and speed of those players and the height and everything, like the physicality of it? What did you notice, like comparing, because then what you're saying is it's valid. And in Southern California, here in the States, the athleticism, the power, the strength is such a key thing when we select kids at such young ages where they think that that's going to win them the game. But what did you notice out there about the player selection and all that?
Yeah, so I'll use one player. I remember this kid's name. His name's John Rizos. I believe he was the right or left back for Barcelona. This kid was the smallest kid on the field. The smallest kid. I mean, I couldn't even believe he was a 20, I think 11. I thought he was at least a 2014. And, this kid's ability just to manipulate the ball, drive he would be able to drive at speed. And I think speed with the ball and speed without are two different things. And, I think driving was a really similar quality every player had out there. Technical skills, obviously, they all had, but I think driving was impressive where they weren't fast, but they were quick. They knew how to fluctuate their speed, right? So, if you go slow, the defender will go slow, and then, you want to change your speed and accelerate out. And I think that's something they really understand was time and space, right? When to change direction, when to accelerate, when to decelerate. And when you do that, it makes you look fast, but in reality, the game is like tag, right? The goal is to get from one side to the other while finding the space and trying to unbalance. And I think they just have a really good understanding of that. But I think you would see maybe one or two teams with an 11-year-old that was maybe 6 feet tall, which was actually crazy to see. And I mean, I think we could all guess that player was playing the 9, and that he was just up there to win headers. But it's unrealistic for most of those players were tiny, very small, not athletic at all. Did they have a good change of speed? They did, but they weren't super athletic. It's all about just, I think, the speed of thought for them. And they did have some fast players, and I think that's a plus for them. But you can see the focus is always the speed of thought, the speed of thought, speed of thought. And I think that's
Execution and decision making, execution and the communication, as Verizon calls it, right?
Yeah.
So man, that's interesting because if that's what the highest level academies in the world are valuing, then what needs to change here locally? What needs to be worked on? Wonder what exactly they work on. I have an idea of what they work on, right, in training because of the games, but those are the type of things that are going to be able to move programs like yours and other teams to value those type of players and to be able to train those things, because that's the game, right?
Yeah.
That's what the game involves.
I have a player, quick story. I have a player on my team. He's not the fastest player. He's a 2015, so he's 7 years old.
Wow.
And I think he was struggling, the first year. He's always trying to outrun players and use speed. And, I think that's the mentality we try to change. And I said, look, you don't have to be the fastest. You don't have to be the strongest, but you can be the smartest. So I think it's good to acknowledge a player's weaknesses and strengths and teach them how to work around their weaknesses. So, most people will put their slowest player in a position where it won't cost them goals, right? My player, he's evolved so much to the point where he's my center back. He's my last man, but he understands, we play a 3-2-1, and he understands how to get out of pressure out of the back, when to time tackles. And it's incredible. I mean, he went from, almost feeling like the game wasn't for him because he wasn't fast, to just improving the speed of thought, decision-making, when to beat a player, when to pass, how to use your body language to sell the idea as if you're going to pass the ball wide. So I'm a big believer in, we can always disguise our pass. So if I look
Yeah.
at my right back, automatically the nine's going to step and anticipate that pass and then just cut inside and take that space. So that's something that he does really well, and I think that's huge for all players because not every kid is born with that athletic ability where they're running full speed. And you hear kids running almost miles each session to improve speed, but it's unrealistic movements. You're not running in a straight line in a game. You're changing direction at least 200 times a game. Um, so I think it's important for players to focus on being smarter rather than faster. And if you're smarter, then you can seem as if you're faster. As I was calling that player, John Rizzo's. I mean, if you get a chance, you can look him up. There might be some highlights on him, but
YouTube.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty. I think that's an important factor
That's great.
for play. Yeah.
So what advice would you give to a parent from a coach's point of view on a player or a son or daughter that they have that enjoys the game, that is smart, you could say, that makes some good decisions, but their coach doesn't value their abilities in the youth game, let's say the foundation phase? What advice would you give to a parent that has, a kid like that?
That's a tough one. I mean, the only word of advice, and I've had a lot of conversations in the last year with parents about that, and I think it's just find the right coach who can appreciate those qualities. Um, and that's hard because I think here in America it's favored if you're fast, you're gonna start, you're gonna play the 10 or you're gonna play out wide. Um, but I don't believe in that, and I think it's just not fair to every kid who isn't born with those qualities. So I think it's finding a coach who believes in those qualities, um, and whether it's finding a club or it doesn't matter. I think it's just every player has different qualities that can bring something to the game. I don't think there's any kid that can't play. Um, it's just identifying again their weaknesses and their strengths, and then you build a player from there. So finding a good coach, I think that goes a long way. Who believes in you?
That's good. No, it's good. It's true. And that's something that I think is happening more and more, I feel, because I think now with social media, now with the internet technology, we're being able to use, or at least hopefully we're able to use technology more for a positive thing and share information and
Yeah,
hopefully connect more with other like-minded people, and whether the coach is available in your area or not, but organizations and programs like yours are able to bring those type of players and value those type of players where they feel good about coming to a program like Prodigy and coming out and be like, well, these coaches, this program, these type of environments, they suit my kid more because it's meant for the soccer player. It's meant for the actual player that loves the game, right? Not
yeah.
just athlete. And have you noticed that when very athletic players and players that dominate on big fields come to Prodigy, that you've noticed? What have you noticed when it comes to that?
Futsal, it exposes you
Yeah.
because you can be on a 7-a-side, 11-a-side field, and you can take off and you can outrun players. Yeah, I get that. But the moment they come to futsal, it shows me who has the ability to dribble, who has the ability to just keep the ball in tight spaces. And those athletic kids come and they're taking 6-yard touches and they're losing the ball every time. And I think that's the great thing about futsal is it's a natural teacher, right? The dimensions are smaller, the space is tighter, so it demands you to keep the ball closer. It demands you to keep the ball at your feet at all times. Your athleticism won't. You can't get away with that. And I think I'm glad you bring that up. I think it's good for players who don't have the athleticism to play futsal because it exposes them in a positive way that look, you do have the ability to play, and it shows in these tight spaces. And I think that's it's a really good tool for again athletic players to learn to slow down the game and understand that it's not all about speed, and it's good for the players who aren't athletic to use those abilities that they have to think and
Yeah.
control the ball and manipulate space to shine there. So I think it complements both in a good way.
Yeah, no, it's true. And And like you said, you get exposed. And what I love to do and see more of is like small-sided situations where you can't hide, you must be good on the ball, you must be good at defending, right? You must be good at basically, everything that the game involves, right? And
Yeah.
there's no better way to put kids in these situations, and improve and to be able to give them, the ability just to go out there and lead themselves, work together to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. So that's great. So now thinking about like the next year or two, looking in the future on what Prodigy has, what your goals are. What are you thinking about in the next few years as the World Cup gets closer and closer here to the States? Where are you seeing Prodigy going? Where do you see yourself going in a few years?
Yeah. So I think when I first started coaching, my thought was that I want to get to the highest level, coach professional. And I think, a lot of coaches go in with that mentality. And I think it's great. But with time, I realized that there's a lot of kids who are being left behind that don't have those qualities of athleticism that we talk about. And I think that's my place in this world, is to just help those players gain a place where they belong with the right time and the right patience. So I think moving forward in the next year or two is just to continue doing what we're doing now, just creating an environment where players can come. There's pressure-free environment. They have the ability to be creative, uh, not worry about fighting for a position. Uh, there's no politics in my program, nothing like that. It's just a place where kids can come, play, develop, and the most important part, going back to Spain and just growing up with the love of the game, is developing a love for the game
Mm.
and creating an environment for that. Whether it's creating good relationships with the players, having music, uh, kids creating friendships, and I think it's much more than a game. It's whether you want to go professional or not, it doesn't matter. It can it can sculpt you to be a good person in the real world with time. And I think that's something that gets overlooked with the sport. I mean, I wouldn't be who I am today if it weren't for playing. I mean, all my friends I have, I'm going to, my best friend's getting married next week. We met through playing since we were 8 or 9. You learn resiliency. You learn, everything comes with hard work and consistency. So I think that's the most important message. Really, is just being consistent with something you love. But again, you have to have a genuine love for it. And yeah, that's the goal, is just keep doing what we're doing. I'm really
Good.
happy where we're at. And that's just helping kids make an impact on the
Good.
youth game and getting them to the highest level possible.
That's good. And one thing I'd like to also ask is like, where do you see the level here in Southern California where you're at, the level of the girls now compared to the boys, or where the girls were, not meaning compare, sorry. Girls now you've seen in the last few years since you started Project Prodigy, how many more girls are showing up, and how have you seen the trajectory of their improvement, and I would say their involvement and parents' involvement in wanting to do extra training and to improve their level? What have you noticed on that side?
Yeah, it's been great. I have so we have a Monday class from 6:30 to 7:45, and we have 2010 beach girls from the ECNL team, and I love these girls. They come and it's 50% girls and 50% boys in the class. And typically we end the session with flying changes or some sort of competition. And the girls, I'll be honest, the girls always they're always beating the boys at the end of the session, and it's good to see them compete. They come in and they hold their own, and they have that desire to want to be there, and I absolutely love working with them. And then Wednesday we also have another class at 6:30 where we have the 2013 ECNL girls, and these girls come out and they come to play. They come to ball out, and they come with that mentality that they want to improve, and they have. I think they made it to the state cup final this last year, and I think from that experience they come back and they want to work harder. But it's the same thing with that group. They're giving the boys a challenge. They're pushing them, and I think it's great for their growth and their development that they get exposed to just different ages. And yeah, it's great. I've built a really good relationship with all of those kids, and it's good to have a mix of boys and girls, and I think it's a healthy approach for development on both sides.
And you don't, within your programs, grassroots and league classes, etc., you don't put the girls only with the girls and the boys only with the boys. You mix them up.
Never, never, never. No, girls are always with boys. They're always mixed up. I don't believe in creating a separate. If you
You
can
hold them to
play,
the same standard.
yeah. If you can play, you can play. That's it.
Yeah.
It's more based on level. As we're growing little by little, we're able to kind of separate the groups. Keep the same level together. And we have some younger kids in our programs that I allow to train a couple years up. So I think it's all about like football age rather than your actual birth year.
Yeah.
So if you have the mentality of a kid that's 3 years older than you, then you deserve to play with that kid. And I think it's a lot of clubs don't have the opportunity to do that because you're trying to build a collective. And that's the good thing about my program is I'm not out to win trophies. I'm not out to prove anything to anyone. Um, my only intention is to put kids in the best situation to develop. So if I could put a 7-year-old with a 10-year-old group that can keep up, then why not? Let's expose them to the older kids. And that goes back to what I was able to do. I was 10 years old going against 14, 15-year-olds, and it made me a better player. So, I think if a player has earned it and they're developing and, they're growing, then they have the opportunity to play at a higher level, then let's do it. Why not? I mean, that's the whole goal, is just to player development for players to come out and improve. So I think that's one thing I love about my program. It's not result driven in regards to trophies. And I think that's something that can be seen as like a facade for success, you know? So it's good. I love it. I love what I do. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
It's good. No, you could tell, and you can hear it in your voice and the way that you speak about, those that you serve, those that, your local community, those that come out, and it looks like a healthy, um, bond and relationship you're building there within your program with those families. That's great.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, Josh, again, I want to ask you what advice you would give to, let's say, a player in this case, right? A player, because we talked about coaching a bit. We talked about a parent advice when it comes to having a player that's intelligent, but maybe not as athletic as others. Now, if you're talking to a player, what advice would you give them? You talked about consistency in the past. If what would you tell someone that is looking to reach that next level?
Uh, I think you just nailed it. I mean, I would say consistency is the key. Watch a player that you really enjoy. Watch a player that plays your position, and watch. I think visual learning is really overlooked. I think going to training is good, but I think what we see, we try to repeat, and that starts from you know when you're a baby, you see your parents doing something and you want to repeat that action. And it's the same way. If I'm watching Ronaldinho play, guess what I'm going to do when I go outside? I'm going to try to play like Ronaldinho. If I'm watching Kevin De Bruyne, I'm going to try to play passes like that. And I've had a player, he just moved to Japan. His name's Kai, and his favorite player was De Bruyne. Guess who was the top assister on my team? It was Kai. Why? Because you are what you repeatedly see, do, and watch. So I think it's important to really feed your mind where you want to be, because if you want to be the best, but you're going home and you're playing video games that aren't applicable to what you want to do, or you're watching videos that have nothing to do with where you want to be, then it's not going to work. And there's kids who on my team that I know are watching videos before they're coming to games, and I can see it. And you can see that they're just repeating what they're watching. So I think putting in the work and feeding your mind the proper fuel. So watching good videos, um, surrounding yourself around good people. Even if you're 8 or 9, you still have the ability to surround yourself around good people, and that's ultimately more advice to the parents. But I think this goes back to Barcelona is you got to be extremely positive and reinforcing. And I think fear is a really uh, instilling fear to push kids to be better is, I think, really outdated. And I think it's important for people to understand that because, my dad grew up, and if I didn't score, I mean, fear was instilled within me. And that's something that really kind of pushed me away from the sport. And for a few years. And yeah, I think that's important, is just feeding your mind the right thing. Mentality is everything.
That's a good point, and that's good advice. And one question that I have for you, for let's say a parent of this kid, is there too much? Would you say that there's too much training or too much soccer if you're a kid or you're a parent?
I think that's ultimately what the kid wants. I think if a kid is asking for it, then you give it to them. If a kid isn't asking for it, don't give it to them. We have to listen to kids. Kids are very intelligent, and if they're telling you something, we can't overlook it. I think it's important to get to know them as human beings, not as children who don't know what they're saying or doing. But you know, for instance, if my kid isn't wanting to train as much as his teammate, I can't say, hey, you have to be like him. My job is to help him cultivate the love for it. And then if it comes, it comes. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. But you don't want to push him away. So something my dad did for me, we would buy those clips. We would watch the Invincibles, and I fell in love with Thierry Henry. I mean, up to this day,
Baller,
I have a
baller.
post in my kitchen. It's Thierry Henry. I have Thierry Henry jerseys. And what he did is he instilled that love for me while I'm getting ready for games. He's playing the Invincible videos. He's playing the Jenga Nike documentary that I posted the other day of, how players in Brazil develop and their struggles and the style of play, of creativity. So he'd always play those things for me, and naturally that love developed by itself. So I think it's putting your child in the right environment, whether it's at home or outside of home, and then that want and need to want to train every day will come. But you can't, just kind of go throughout your day and expect your kid to want to train every day when you're not feeding them mentally. So I think feeding your child mentally, all that consistency will come naturally.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's good advice. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Last thing, any books or blogs or any specific um place where or book that you would recommend to anyone watching, whether it's coaching, parent, player, where would you direct them?
Yeah. One book that this book changed my life. It's called Mind Gym,
Mm,
and it just talks about just different mental obstacles you'll go through, and
mhm.
at the end of the day, it teaches perspective. And I think kids are capable of understanding perspective if we give them the time of day to explain it to them. But it teaches it give different stories from Serena Williams to Tiger Woods, Kobe Bryant, and I think I was in high school. I was a sophomore, and there was this kid who his name was Sean, and he had walked onto the field, and this was when Galaxy Academy first started, and he was a Galaxy Academy player, and this guy just walked on the field as if he knew he was going to score. Just the biggest chip on his shoulder, but super humble guy. And I think he had gone in at halftime. His first touch on the ball, almost from the 40-yard line, he cuts inside, finishes top bins, and walks away as if like he knew that was going to happen. And I talked to him and I said, "How did you get to where you are? Like why are you so good?" And he said, and this is a junior or senior, this a 17-year-old telling me that he said, just as much as you exercise your body and your footwork, you have to exercise your mind. And that stuck with me, man. I mean,
Well,
it was a massive impact. And again, you can do that at any age. I don't think there's an age limit to that. So I think that Mind Gym is a good one. And I think maybe for parents, The Alchemist is a good one for me. I don't know if you've read that one. What I really got out of it was it's not about the final journey. It's about the destination and who you become in the process. And I think that translates to development, right? Whether you end up playing professional or not, it's, from 8 to 27, who I am now, it's who you became as a person, the friendships you've made, the way you were able to overcome adversity. And I think that's the most important part. It's not about the end goal. It's about who you become day in and day out as a person, not only as a player. So that's huge. That's a big one.
No, that's good. That's great advice. And lastly, where can the audience find more information about you, your program, and what you're up to?
You guys can follow me on Instagram. It's Prodigy_Futbol, FUTBOL, or prodigyfutbol.com. So yeah, if anyone ever has any questions, I'm open to conversations and anything we can do to just help the community grow as a country.
Yeah, great. Well, again, Coach Josh, thank you so much for your time, for making time on this Friday here as we're recording this. Hope those that are listening, that are watching, whether you're a player, coach, parent, you found value from what we talked about today. Again, follow Coach Josh on Instagram. Check out his website and connect. Let's stay connected. Thank you again for your time, Coach.
Cool, Walter. Thanks a lot, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Have a good one. Thanks. Bye.
All right.